And then do we have Kathy?
I'm here.
Hi, Kathy. Oh,
Hi.
great. Welcome. Okay, so it's 6:02. So I'm going to get us started with our session tonight. Tonight is session 5, and it's a session that people always ask a lot about how to get funding for projects, and of course, you know, the age-old budget question. So tonight we're going to go through just some additional information about how do you pay for a capstone project. So you have this great idea to do in your community, and so what do you do to pay for your capstone project? So I'm presenting right now, but does everybody see my screen?
Yep.
And do you guys see an actual presentation up? Oh, good, there we go. Okay, so tonight we're going to cover some learning objectives. Hopefully you guys got a chance to peruse all of the information in the pre-session assignments, but we're going to be going through elements of a successful grant. We're going to talk a little bit about cash and in-kind sources of funding. We're going to take a look at some small grants that are available through the Chesapeake Bay Trust and Unity Gardens. If you've never written a grant before, these are great places to start. And we're going to go through the elements of the capstone project budget. And lastly, hopefully you gleaned from the pre-session information some places where you can get funding for your project from the county and the city. So I want to pause for a minute and just do a little quick introduction of two of our guest speakers. We're essentially going to be in a minute going to 3 different breakout rooms. In one of the breakout rooms, you're going to get a chance to meet 2 representatives of local funders. So Kathy Somoza is with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and she manages their small, their mini grant program, and has a lot of experience with reviewing different grants and talking to grantees and finding, you know, just the right project or grant that will fit a funding source. So Kathy's going to share with us a little bit about Chesapeake Bay Trust, and then Jody Miller, who's the executive director of the Unity Gardens. That's our local Anne Arundel County funding organization that really helps to promote native plants and native planting. So Joni and Kathy are going to be with us tonight, and they're going to share a little bit about their funding sources and answer your questions. So welcome, and thank you, Kathy and Joni, for being here tonight. And they're going to introduce themselves more in the small group. So we'll have the 2 of them in one small group, and then Trish is going to join us for a second small group. And she will be talking about the budget, the capstone budget form. And then I'll be the 3rd small group talking about capstone proposal part 2 and all of the funding parts of that piece of WSA. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Really, the bulk of our evening is going to be those 3 breakout rooms. In a minute, Francesca is going to send us all to our breakout rooms. We'll have 15 minutes in each session, and then she's actually going to switch the presenters. So presenters will get switched to our next, and we'll have a second 15-minute and a third 15-minute, and then we'll land back together at about 6:50 to wrap up the session. So with that, I'm going to let Francesca go ahead and switch us into our various sessions.
All right, just a second. So if your name is not accurate, could you just rename yourself on Zoom? Just take a second to do that. You can click on participants, click on yourself, and then rename yourself. And I'm almost done sorting us. So you should have it popping up on your screen now. All right, give me just 1 second to double check that everybody is in the right place.
Great, Jessica, I didn't get an invitation.
Okay, thanks. You're staying in this one, Josh, right?
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay.
Francesca, I didn't get an invitation either. Maybe I'm staying.
Yeah, so everybody that is in this room should be either sure that they're doing the ELIT track or think that they might or unsure. Is that accurate? Is anybody
Yes.
definitely doing Rainscaping?
I am.
Okay, I
too.
think a couple
Doing
people
Rainscaping.
joined after I sorted. So 1 second.
I would like Rainscaping.
Okay, so that was Marie and Jim.
And Diane, please. Diane Hill.
Allison.
Diane Hale?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right, we can get started.
Lauren Tooby also
Francesca,
Rainscaping.
I'm Rainscaping also.
Sorry.
Stacy
Okay.
Allen.
I think a few people were joining as I was.
And I believe Allison as well.
And Lauren, was that you that said that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, great. So we have Kathy and Joni here with us. So if you guys could introduce yourselves and get started, that would be amazing.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Somoza. I am the program assistant to the restoration team at the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and I'm also the lead of the Community Engagement and Restoration Mini Grant Program.
Hi there, I'm Joni Miller. I'm the executive director at Unity Gardens. And thank you guys for having us here tonight. Really excited to talk to everyone.
And folks, as they're working through their presentations, as you have questions, if you can put them into the chat, I'll be moderating tonight. So we'll hold off until the very end of both presentations and we'll get everybody's questions answered at that point, okay? Kathy, with that being said, I think everybody can see my screen. You should be first up and we'll go from there.
Yep, I can see your screen. Thanks so much for sharing. So yeah, we'll be talking about the Community Engagement Mini Grant Program today, and you can go ahead and move forward one slide. So first, we'll talk about what you should be doing in your application to be successful for this mini grant program. And I have limited time, so I'm going to go through these quickly, and I'm not going to hit every single bullet point, but I think you're getting it after. So first, I'll really emphasize the need to read through the entire RFP thoroughly. Read it as many times as you need to. All of the information that you could possibly need, it is all contained in that request for proposals, and that lives on our grant page site. So it lists, all of the narrative questions that you have to answer, and all of the supporting documents we're looking for. It lists, what type of projects we're looking to support. And after that, if you read through that and have any questions, I'm always available to answer any additional questions or concerns. So reach out to me as well. I'm also a resource that you can use. And then one other thing to really focus on from this slide are partnerships. So partnerships are something that I've seen kind of be the tipping point sometimes in whether we decide to, support a project or not. And that is because oftentimes a grantee might have, the will and the good intention to conduct a project, but we're also looking for someone that has that expertise as well. So if you can assemble an application team that is committed, but also can demonstrate the right expertise to successfully conduct a project, that is something that is always viewed favorably and can lead to an approval. And lastly, there's also a mentorship program specifically for this grant program. And that is another good resource, and it allows you to connect with a experienced mentor organization, someone who has been approved a couple of awards in the past, and they can help you, assemble your proposal, which I know can be a daunting task sometimes. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, and they can assemble your application and guide you through that process. So those are the main points that I'll focus for that, and then we can move forward to what should you avoid. So really avoid being vague. We want to be able to understand what you are trying to accomplish in your project. So give us as many details as possible. Don't use one sentence responses. Those are usually the applications that get declined, unfortunately, because we don't know what you're trying to accomplish. And I've listed partnerships here again because it really is very important. Don't miss out on forming those partnerships up front and showing us that you have commitment from those groups and that they'll be essential to carrying out your project. And also lastly, from here is the budget is very important. The budget kind of is, it tells the story of what you're actually looking for funding for. So, make sure that it correlates to what you're saying in your narrative, and make sure that it's very complete and focused on what you're trying to accomplish in your project. And so that's what I'll say for that. And one other thing is just making sure that you have a fully fleshed out project before you come in and submit an application, because we do want to support things that are, ready to go should you be awarded. And we can move forward to the last thing. So my top tip for this mini grant program is, something we're looking for projects that are going to benefit both the community and local natural resources in a lasting and meaningful way. So any project that proposes to accomplish those two main goals is likely to be successful as long as you have all of the right documents to support that, and you have a complete narrative. You have a really good chance of being approved in this program. And I'll leave it to Joni.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, hi, again, my name is Joni and I'm with Unity Gardens. We are a small nonprofit in Anne Arundel County, and we only do one thing, and that's give out grants for native plants. Sometimes we are the whole project, and then sometimes we are part of a larger project. This year, we are encouraging people to choose either a $500 grant or a $1,000 grant. And that's different from past years because we have a little bit less in funding to give away this year. So in order to try to reach as many groups as possible, we're hoping that some groups will apply for a little less money, but work harder to get matching funds from the folks that they're working with. We have 2 grant cycles throughout the year. We are in an application cycle right now. We are accepting applications till March 1st, which I know is way too late or too early for you guys, but the fall grant cycle might be perfect. Excuse me. We usually put our application up about a month and a half before, or I'm sorry, our grant application will open up on June 15th of this year and end on August 1st, and then we'll be awarding grants in September. Josh, do you want to move forward? So the kinds of projects that we fund are native planting projects that involve community. So our perfect project is one where you're using native plants to address stormwater runoff, flooding, erosion, or habitat loss. Maybe a lot of trees have come down near your neighborhood recently, and you need to put back trees and pollinator plants and things to build back the ecosystem. We really do like to see partnerships and leadership from the community. So that might mean if you yourself are a volunteer with your homeowners association or your place of worship or a scout troop, you're not getting paid, you're gathering up the volunteers and teaching people and putting them to work. That's the kind of project that we look for. And then also education, making sure that the gardens that we put in are visible and people understand more about why native plants are important and they get to see them in action. So in terms of what might set your application apart, our kind of best applications are not ones that are 50 pages long, but ones that are clear and concise and tell us exactly what you want to do. We want to see that you've done your homework, that you've done all the planning and the research that you need, and you're educated and ready to go. And then what's really helpful is lots of visuals. Send us pictures of your before site. Send us sketches of what you plan to do, because our grant review committee kind of sits down and we're looking at a lot of grant applications at once, and ones that we can really visualize what's going to be happening at the site are, and there's no questions. Those are the ones that are gonna rise to the top. And obviously, kind of like Kathy said, just make sure that you've completed everything and all the pieces that we asked for are there. Because if we leave our grant meeting saying, well, this sounds really great, except I don't understand this one part, or we need more information, that might be the thing that makes your grant application not get funded. Not because it's not a good application, but because there's other ones that are better prepared. So applications that are kind of go to the bottom of the pile are ones that are confusing, pieces are missing, they're too long. And I mean that in that they're so long that it's hard to see what the real point is. And then if there's questionable details, property access, it might be a private property, but you haven't been clear about if you have permission to work there, or if the property owner is involved, or if the property owner is putting any money into the project. So wherever your site is going to be, tell us who owns it and how they're involved. And then the last thing is just, sometimes the projects are huge and big, and it just seems like it may not happen because they're too big of an idea. And Josh, you want to move forward? So just to wrap up, our application is on our website. It's up right now if you want to look at it, even if you're not applying. The due date's March 1st. You can always contact me at my personal email address. And if you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, you'll get notifications about when the grant application is going up. We work with watershed stewards a lot. I'd say probably a third of our grantees time are watershed stewards, sometimes even more than that. So, we love what you're doing and we really like working with you. So give me a shout if you have questions.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Josh, I got a couple of questions that were direct messages, but
Okay.
I can read them out loud and answer for the entire group.
That would be great. Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, sure. So from Diane, I think, can you give us examples of good projects that the trust has funded in the past? And she also asked, I understand 2/3 of the trust applications don't make it, and what are the common reasons why? So to clarify that 2/3 of the applications don't make it, we have several grant programs. And so for mini grants specifically, what you'll see in the RFP is that for the past, I think 3 years, we've had a 70% approval rate. So this mini grant really is geared towards new groups that are new to grant writing and the whole grant world. So we are much less competitive than other large grant programs that we offer. So it is 70% approval rate. And then some good examples, we really appreciate anything that's innovative. I know that we just got one project that is proposing to foster monarch butterflies and connect them and, involve communities of color in that. And so it's just a really great, we're looking for diverse audiences. And so anything that connects diverse groups with our natural resources is something that we're always excited about. But really, any restoration, community engagement, or hybrid project that is well prepared, like Joni said, has all of the right components, you have permission, you've researched what the larger initiatives are, and if your project can help advance existing, tree planting initiatives or stormwater management goals wherever you're working, then it's always going to be viewed favorably. So that's what I'll say for, how can you be successful? And then, I see that Linda posted to everybody. Yes, so K through 12 education, we actually have a separate mini grant program for that, and that is called the Environmental Education Mini Grant. So that's why this community engagement and restoration does not accept K through 12 proposals, because we have a specific grant program for that. And so we will direct you to that if you submit a proposal to our grant program. But I do recommend reaching out to Emily Stransky for that program, and she's a great resource and could connect you.
We have just a little bit of time left, like less than a minute. So if anyone has a really quick question, other than that, we'll rotate groups. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathy and Joni, for joining us. I am going to send you to your next group. So bear with me just a minute. Thank you.
Hey, I don't know if I did the switching right, Francesca. It just said leave room, so I left the room. But Josh is still here. And Joni's still here. Where am I supposed to be? You're muted.
Yep, I am muted. I just realized that. Yep, you're in the right place. I'm just moving Josh and
got it.
Joni now. Yep.
Oh, Francesca?
1 second.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. And did I hear Trish was in here?
Yes. I think I'm
don't
in the
see her
wrong
name.
room.
Yeah, I don't see your name, so I can't move you. Give me a second.
Okay, sorry.
That's
All
okay.
right, I'm going to get us started while we're, so hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne, as you know, and I'm going to share a little presentation with you tonight about Capstone Proposal Part 2. So you guys are about to turn in Capstone Proposal Part 1, and Trisha's talking to you, if you haven't already seen it, all about the budget part of Capstone Proposal Part 2. So I thought I would give you sort of the big picture, just to sort of just get you introduced to this next assignment. So can everybody see, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Great. I'm not getting my slides to advance. That's fun. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Capstone Proposal Part 2 is actually just a continuation of the same form that you filled in for your assessment. So it begins on page 7 of the blank form, but it's just a continuation. And it's intended to be a place where you gather and try to articulate the idea of your project. Do we have any environmental literacy folks in this group? Is this the ELIT group?
Yes.
For me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, so you're the ELIT. So the idea of what, what group you want to do your environment or your educational project with, and what you want to do it about. It's your general big picture idea. Don't be too concerned if it's not all set in stone. And I know that Noelle has been talking with many of you, so you're sort of getting some ideas and getting things gelled, but don't worry if it's not like totally all the specifics. And again, Noelle's going to help you answer the questions on the form. And the form itself is, it's meant to guide you through the process of thinking about what your educational program is going to be. But we've found that educational programs can be so different that they really, it's really best to work with your mentor. And so then part 3, capstone proposal part 3 is due about 2 months before your actual program. And that's where you get really fine-tuned on details. So part 2 is your ideas as they get fleshed out. And since you guys are the ELIT, I'm going to skip the Rainscaping stuff, except to say that we created this form to look a lot like a grant application. And so it might seem long and arduous, but if you fill out this information, you should be ready to almost copy and paste into a grant application. So that's why the form looks the way it is. And it's meant to organize your ideas, and it can get updated as your plan gets more clear. So on March 30th, you might turn something in by saving it in your Google Drive, but you might have updates and new ideas and things that fall into place, and you can continue to update this as things get more and more clear. So if you're applying for a grant, you might need a sponsoring organization. So I talked a little bit about what a fiscal agent is in the Stone Soup presentation. So if you need a fiscal agent for your grant, you would fill out the information about the fiscal agent there. And I'm going to switch to all the way to the ELIT track. So ELIT, let's see. All right. So with the ELIT track, you're going to start by just filling out the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your project. So what's the description of your educational program? Who are you educating? Where are you going to do the education? So basically, the description is there on the left-hand side of the slide. And then next, you're going to fill out your outreach summary. So this is a really confusing part of the form or part of the capstone project. So you're all going to do an educational program to some audience, right? So let's take, for example, Elmer. Elmer might decide to do an educational program. I'm just making this up, Elmer, so it's not meant to be your project, but let's just say he decides to do an educational program for the grounds committee at his church because they have some rainscaping projects they have to take care of. So his educational project is all about how to take care of a rain garden. But his outreach portion is really to the general, to the congregation as a whole. So he might be presenting to the parish council about his plan to do this educational project. He might do a second outreach, might be doing an article in the bulletin about native plants. And a third one might be some sort of a blessing that he has of the church rain garden. So his congregation can come out and see it. So the education, the outreach has to do with the community as a whole. The educational program is really who you're teaching and what you're teaching. Let me pause and just see what questions you guys have about that. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, all right. You can continue to talk more to Noelle about that. And then the next part of the form prompts you a little bit about the budget. So you're actually going to fill in a budget, and Noelle can help you with this. Typically, educational programs have a much lower cost than Rainscaping projects do. So you may need a grant or you may not need a grant. You may not even need to do a grant if you don't have a high cost. And remember that Watershed Stewards Academy also provides some funding for the cost of your project as well. So if you need a grant, you can do your total cost. Let's say your total cost is $1,000, and you're going to get 250 from a mini grant. You're going to get 250 from your congregation, and you're going to get 500 from WSA. You're just going to write your funding sources. And then last, if you have any in-kind donations, and you're going to actually turn in the capstone budget form. Have you guys already been to Trisha's? No, not yet. Trisha's going to talk to you a little bit about the capstone project budget form and how to fill that out, but you're going to just do turn in a very general budget form with your proposal part 2. Okay, and then the last piece is a draft lesson plan, and Noelle's going to give you some examples of these, and it's basically, what is your educational program going to be about? What are you going to do? What are all the details? So she's going to give you an example, and so you'll do your own lesson plan as part of this form. Okay. Last, takeaways. What I wanted you to get out of this presentation is that your capstone proposal part 2 is due on March 30th. And you can just type right into your capstone proposal and reflection form and save it into your Google Drive folder. You're going to include a budget with it. So that is all I have for the moment. What questions do you guys have about part 2?
We have a question in the chat from Elmer. What are typical and allowed educational expenses?
Ooh. So it depends on the funder and what kinds of things that they allow. Some funders will fund things like t-shirts and refreshments, some will not. Transportation, again, some funders will and some funders won't. So you want to take a look at the RFP, the request for proposal, and see what people fund. For WSA, we will fund almost anything that is not harmful to the environment. So we won't fund non-native plants. We won't fund, I don't know what else we won't fund. Probably toxic chemicals, unless they're like part of getting an invasive ridding program. But we'll be the funder that will be able to most help you fill in what other funders won't. So you can work with Noelle and she can let you know what approved costs are. We do printing if you need to produce, handouts or, whatever other things, like hard copy things if you need them. Did that answer your question, Elmer?
Yes, that was fine.
Awesome. Good question. What other questions do people have?
Linda has a question about the timeline. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. All right, Linda, the timeline. So
when are we going to do our project? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
got it.
no, I don't have a problem with the dates or anything. I'm like, how are we doing this with COVID? It's just so bizarre.
Like everything else in COVID world, like we just have to be flexible. In general, most stewards do fall projects. And so if I were you guys, I would probably be looking to late summer, fall, because then we'll at least have a little better idea of where we are with vaccines, I would probably do something while the weather's good so you can do it outside. All of that said, this is challenged by choice, right? And people, including yourself, might not be comfortable coming together for a while. Schools are about to go back, so I think people will get more and more comfortable with that. But as we open up, our organization does have COVID protocols and some other, how to meet safely together. And we actually have at our conference this year, we have a couple of presenters who have been doing outreach in the time of COVID. And so I think if you're doing ELIT, you might really want to attend that session. Liana Vitale with Park and Recs has been doing educational programs for kids, so she could talk through, get some examples from her. But if I were you, I'd probably shoot for late summer, early fall for your project. And again, it could be that your project gets delayed depending on what you want to do even further if you really do want to do in-person stuff, and in-person stuff just isn't going to be a good fit for your audience. Does that answer your question? That was a really good one.
Yeah, because I was hoping to maybe have stations. I have a big yard and we have a big area, and maybe having stations with hand sanitizer and wipes if they were going to use any of the models from you guys, from Arlington Echo, and I can see maybe at the end of August, maybe it might work. Maybe things might be, able to do that for one of the events,
Yeah. Yeah, it really depends on your community. And as you move forward to plan your project, you probably will be wanting to talk with whoever your group is that you're going to be doing your educational program with about what their COVID tolerances are.
And we have just 1 minute left, so if you have a question, go for it.
I put a question in this is Dagmar. I put a question in.
Oh, yes. Oh, who is likely to fund videos?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I would ask the Chesapeake Bay Trust and it depends on what kind of video too. And how much, what kind of a budget you have for your video. We've done a bunch of video projects actually just this fall. So we could probably tell you a little bit more about what we spent, and there's sort of an easy way and a hard way, like a professional and a non-professional way to do that. But Dagmar, I think St. Luke's has done a bunch of videos, right? Just
Right.
little, so they might be able to give you some hints on how to do very simple, low budget videos.
Right. Okay. Good.
All right.
Thank you.
And it's time to switch. So thank you so much, Suzanne. Okay. All right, and we'll next have Trish, who will be joining us, and Trish is on staff with WSA, and she'll be talking about capstone budgets.
Hey.
And there she is. Thanks,
Hi.
Trish.
Okay, hang on. I have to delete my. Just start over. They're all ahead of me. Okay, let me share my screen. Hi, I'm Trish Hennessy Webb. And let me share. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how you use your template. And so I will tell you that I am not able to see the chat. So I would really love if you have a question just to stop me. Just say Trish. I'll stop talking and you can ask your question. Okay. So with that, I'm going to get started. So I'm Trish Hennessy Webb. I am a Master Watershed Steward from Class 2. I am the office system administrator. I do all of the finances for the office or for the company, and I am a retired engineer. So I have done my capstone project as well. So I know what boat you guys are all in. All right, so with your template, with that capstone template that you have, you're gonna do a big picture budget. You're gonna do a planning budget. The template is already built in with some standard costs in there for you. And I'll show you some examples of that. But that is a planning tool. You're gonna identify all of your needs for your project and your how you plan to pay for it. It's just a planning tool. That one's gonna be due at the end of March. You're then going to, once you get closer to your project and you've mapped out more details about your project, you're going to open up your planning tool big picture budget that you plan for, and you're going to start adding detail. You're going to take away the projected costs and put in your actual costs of what your project is going to cost you. All right, so the other thing I wanted to just quickly touch base with is, while everybody is using the exact same template, typically the environmental, if you're on the environmental literacy track, you probably won't have much contractual support. So you'll just leave that whole section blank. You may not have any plant orders either, and that section you will leave blank, but you'll probably have supplies. And so that's the section that you'll focus on adding your information to. And typically the environmental literacy projects are a lower cost, and so they don't require as much funding, and it's much easier to identify a funding source for your projects. For the rainscaping projects, you're still using the same spreadsheet, but you'll probably populate the contractual support section. You'll probably be adding in plant material, and you may have to actually add in a row within each section of shrubs. If, for say, if you need to have a list of 15 different shrubs for your capstone project. And you will also spend a little bit more time on the right side of the spreadsheet identifying your funding streams and your different funders. So that's generally the difference of the two approaches to the same spreadsheet. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to kind of go through a couple of examples. The first one is the planning tool. So this, a steward planned to do a conservation landscape project. And this was her planning budget that she submitted for her project. So you can see that for her conservation project, there was no contractual services, so it was just left blank. Didn't even need to worry about it. The next section, the steward identified, I'm going to use some perennials in this project. So they just put in mixed types of butterfly gardens. They're going to be part shade, part sun. And I'm going to need 147 of them. And the cost for that is $5 a gallon. So it's just a planning tool. This is, I think I'm going to need this amount for my project. Then move down to the next one of, I think I'm going to need some shrubs too. So mixed shrubs for my butterfly garden. And I think I'm going to need 7 or 8 of them. And the cost for them is approximately $18. So you're going to populate this information with, I'm going to need 30 or 20, and the cost will automatically change for you. 5 or whatever the number, whatever your number is that you think you're going to use. You're just going to step through it all the way through, and you're going to need some other supplies. I'm going to need some mulch, some compost. I need to give some refreshments to my volunteers. And you're just going to map out generally how much this project's going to cost you. And if you go through it, at the end, it'll tell you, well, this project's going to cost me $1,400 or $1,455. It's a general, gives you a general understanding of how much this conservation project's going to cost you when you move forward and how you're going to move forward with it. So once you've done your planning needs, you still have to go into your budget and identifying how you're going to pay for the project. So this one is, it's a big picture. Well, I know Unity Gardens pays for plants. So I'm going to have the cost of my plants be paid for by Unity Gardens. I know that my HOA is going to kick in some money. So I'm going to have my SCBD pay for those fees. So you're just going to make sure that it all balances out when you do your planning big picture budget. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one unless somebody has any questions. This is just your big picture planning. Okay. The next one, I'm going to do an ELIT example for if there's any ELIT people in there. So for my environmental literacy track, so they did not have any contractual. This was the Bluebirds project at the library. They didn't have any contractual services. They weren't purchasing any plant material, so they left that section blank. But they did have other supplies that they were going to use. So actually, I'm just going to hide this so you can see it better. Hide. They did have supplies that they were using, and they just mapped out what the supplies were. They identified the cost for those supplies, and their project only was $67. So they were able to secure private funds for their project. It was probably a neighbor or a collection at the library, or the steward, well, you don't have to, volunteered, I would like to donate, this for my project. So that's an example of a ELIT project. You still have to complete the budget. The numbers still have to balance. You still have to have your total cost and your total funds. So a little more detail, a larger scale environmental literacy project. This project, they were doing the HOA stormwater management course or putting it together. Well, they did have contractual services. So it does happen. You just put in your information just as you would for any of the others. Contractual services, they didn't need any plants, so they left that section blank, and any supplies that they needed. And they moved to the other side of how are they going to pay for the project. So as long as your numbers balance, the left side of your spreadsheet matches the right side of the spreadsheet, which will tell you down at the bottom that everything matches. Your capstone mentor will approve your budget. Okay. Before I go into the last one, the tree trooper, which is a detailed budget, does anybody have any questions? Okay, great. You guys are all pros at this. Okay, so the last one is a lot more detailed. So this is a tree trooper project that was done. It was 2 stewards working together, so it was a much larger project. They did 20 trees they did a planting with 20 trees, almost 60 shrubs put together. And I don't want to scare anybody, but they did the exact same process. They just walked through the spreadsheet and put in the information. So this is a detailed budget. They put in the actual removing contractual services that they were going to need and how much it really cost and who was going to actually do the work. They identified the supplier. This project did not have any perennials, so that section was left blank. But they did have quite a bit of shrubs and trees for their project. And you'll notice that they're not using the estimated cost. They're using what the nursery provided them as the true cost for their each of their shrubs and each of their trees that they were selecting for their project. Okay, I want to make sure I don't lose anybody. So it's a matter of just entering in your information, working it across the spreadsheet to identify the quantity, the cost, and it'll total up how much your shrubs will cost you. The right side of the spreadsheet, so in this example, for the detail, they received these tree troopers received a Unity Garden grant for some of their project. They were able to pay for quite a bit of this $1,300 from their Unity Gardens. They spent $1,000 on the shrubs material, but they still had money left over. They still had a cost of $310 that they had to account for. So what they did was, well, they used an other cash match, and they identified other funding streams that they could use to pay for the rest of their shrubs. And that's all they did was they identified the balance of the expense towards another funder. And that's kind of what you guys will do when you're putting together your capstone budget of, it may not be funded completely by your Unity Garden grant, but you're going to need to explain out exactly how you're going to break out your Unity Garden grant by each of your costs. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So it's same process, just worked across the trees and identified how they were going to pay for them. And as long as things match in your budget, you're good. Now, so this project had 2 stewards working together, and the WSA will you can request, each steward can request up to $500 for their project. And while these 2 stewards worked together, they were able to combine that, and so they could request $1,000 for this capstone project. And they identified how they were going to spend their $1,000. They were going to use that money to spend on mulch, but they still had money left over that they still had to pay for that expense. So they identified another funding stream that they could use. Okay. And as long as it totals up at the bottom, it should work. All right, so the last thing I just wanted to connect real quickly with you is these last 2 columns of the spreadsheet, which are your expenses and remaining budget. So once you start your project, you will start to record all of your expenses that come in. So I purposely did this one because this happens quite a bit for projects. You will have said, I plan in my budget that Richard's Tree Service will charge me $3,200 for removing invasive trees and bush. Well, the day comes and Richard's Tree Service provides the service, but they say, you know what? I love what you guys are doing. I'm going to give you a discount. I'm only going to charge you $3,000 for that piece of work. Well, you need to record the actual expense of that service. So that's where you're going to record your information in column O, what the true cost of that expense was. And so the remaining budget shows you what's left over after all of your true expenses have come in. And pause for a second. Any questions on that? That I know is a lot. Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to connect with you guys about is for this, if you're going to ask for WSA funds, you need to make sure that you have spoken to your capstone mentor and that your funds have been approved. You're not guaranteed the $500. We will look at your capstone budget to confirm that it meets with our requirements as well. So for example, if you have identified that your funds are going to be used for some plants, but the plants are invasive plants, WSA won't provide funds for that. Same goes for like Unity Gardens, if you've identified funds for Unity Garden in other places. Your WSA capstone mentor will work with you to make sure that you do it successfully.
All right, we're just about out of time. Does anybody have a quick question?
With our educational ones, a lot of it's going to be down under other supplies, right?
Yes, correct.
They don't give you much lines. You didn't give us much lines.
And that's true. You can add lines, just add a row.
All right, so everybody's going to join us. Thank you, Trish, for helping and explaining that so well. So yeah, we're going to all rejoin in the main room now, so sit tight. Oh, we've bought a minute because it's counting down unless people join us. So if anyone has another question, go for it.
Can I ask, has anybody actually opened the spreadsheet yet?
I looked at it.
Oh. If you have any questions along the way, we're certainly here to help you. You can always check in. It is a template, so it is meant to be, if you need to modify it, that's okay too. It's a template that mimics our other funders. So it's definitely a tool. So I don't want you to get caught up if you're struggling with it. It's a tool.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Suzanne is going to make a couple of announcements.
There's a song that they sing at Arlington Echo whenever someone says announcements. One day we'll sing it together. So just as a quick reminder, there's an assessment for each session. If you haven't done them, please go back and do them for us. The assessment for this session will be posted tomorrow, so you'll be able to see it there. Next week, we're going to start talking all about plants. That's going to be fun. In our learning pods this week, we're going to be sharing a little bit about our social assessments, and then just a reminder that your capstone proposals part 1 and community presentations are due on February 16th. And I actually did forget about this part. Now Francesca has a poll for us, right?
Yes. We have a poll for some content that's coming up in a few weeks. We're going to be talking about pollution sources and behavior changes or habits that help. So I'm going to launch this now. Please choose the 2 that you are most interested in learning more about, and that will help us to inform that session.
While you're answering that, when we came back on, I can't really see everybody's faces. And I just wanted to say thank you so much one more time to Kathy and Joni. I know Joni's already stepped off, but Kathy, if you're still here, thanks so much for joining our session tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so thank you for those that have responded. I think we've got just about everybody, so go ahead and get it in there really quick. Excellent, thank you all. All right.
And Francesca, will you be able to save this for later, for me to digest later?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, great.
Oh, there it is, sorry, there it is.
Okay, and then so after class for our extended 30 minutes tonight, we have the option of GIS, if you have questions on GIS. If you have questions on grants and funding, that is an option. Or if you have general questions, then you can stay in the main room. So I'm going to open those rooms. You can choose the one to go to. General class questions stay here. And if you don't have the ability to choose, then just do me a favor and either type it in the chat or one at a time say your name and where you would like to go.
Hey, wait, whoa, 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 whoa.